Okay, we're right at 2 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just real quick, if you all feel comfortable, I would love it if you would come on camera. Don't feel pressure, but it's always helpful on, a platform like this, so I don't feel so alone, knowing that I'm not the only one in the room. But again, no pressure. I would love to see your faces. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself. Oh, we have one more person here. Okay. Something else I want to mention real quick is if you have a pen and paper or a journal or your phone or computer, I really encourage you to take some notes, and I will be specific when I think it's a great time to write something down and just, feel like you can participate as we go along. So my name is Joyelle Naomi, and I am from Denver, Colorado. And I'm a mama of two, and I've homeschooled for a little over 10 years now. Can't believe it. My son is a sophomore in university, and he's studying cybersecurity and also cultural anthropology as a double major, which I'm super stoked about because my degree is in cultural anthropology. So it's always really cool when you have a kiddo who's following in your footsteps. I don't know where he got the cybersecurity thing from, because that definitely ain't me. But the anthropology I have down. So I also have a daughter who is 17. As a matter of fact, she just turned 17 this week. I can't believe how time flies by. But she's a prolific singer, songwriter, and prolific writer. And I don't just say that because I'm her mom, but she's just amazing. But she also has some learning differences. And our homeschool journey has allowed us to work through those differences, and she's overcome many of them. I'm a diehard Trekkie. Do not talk to me about Star Wars. I will kick you out of my house. Diehard Trekkie. And I'm also famous for saying there's a Star Trek episode for that. And it's really, really annoying. But I am who I am. And I'm also a single mom. And I am a single mom because I got divorced. When I first started homeschooling, I was married, but eventually I found the courage to leave a very, very difficult marriage after 16 years of being a stay-at-home mom. And I literally had to start my life over with nothing to my name. And it was a really, really tough journey. And really, the main reason why it was so difficult was because I didn't have a community. I didn't have a community where I felt like I belonged. I didn't feel like I had a community that had the resources or support that were really beneficial to me and my kiddos. And I didn't have any family that was supporting me. And all of my friends lived out of state. So we really felt alone for a long time. And I thought to myself, though, that like I cannot be the only one who's going through this. So through my own experience, I started various nonprofits to support our people and to support our community, which brings me to our topic today, which is how to create a homeschool community beyond the internet. So in preparation for today's session, and for some of you who just joined, I just encouraged everybody, if you feel comfortable, to come on camera so I can see your beautiful face and not feel like I'm so alone in the room, but no pressure. I want everybody to feel super comfortable. And if you have some tea like I do, or coffee, feel free to grab it and just chill out with me, okay? Okay, so in preparation for today's session, I decided to search on Google and YouTube how to start a community. I was just really curious to see what would actually come up. And I was super tickled because we have results like this: 10 steps to starting a homeschool co-op. Then we have 9 steps to start a homeschool co-op. Then 8 questions to ask to start a homeschool co-op. 7 steps to starting a homeschool, what? Co-op, yeah. Surprisingly, there's 6 steps. There were 6 steps to anything. We just jumped down to 5 steps to starting a homeschool co-op. And some of the steps that were given were things like find a good location, make sure you have a mission and vision statement, determine what classes and curriculum you want to use, create a schedule, group rules, and then we even had one that said, most importantly, have fun. And so I'm not necessarily mocking or knocking any of that. I think that we love in our society our steps. We have like 5 steps to a better you. And truth be told, in this talk, I actually do have 4 things to consider, and I will also have 3 things for us to consider today. And so I'm just adding to the countdown, doing my part to society. But circling back to some of the suggestions that I saw on these articles and in the videos were actually really good practical steps to starting. But in this session, I want to encourage, challenge, and equip us with some tools that will help us to examine and reimagine what it is that we are actually building when starting a homeschool community. So in other words, what is the essence of what we're creating? What's really at the heart of what we're creating? Many times we think about community, when we think about community, we imagine things that are similar to what the Google and YouTube search results produced, which are things that are tangible, right? So a program or a group, a co-op, a building, a neighborhood, or even a gathering at a church or a place of worship. What's interesting is what I noticed, even though I searched for how to start a homeschool community, like I've already pointed out, this co-op thing kept coming up over and over again. And what on some level, I think it makes sense, because I think oftentimes we're a little programmed to think, oh, homeschool community automatically means co-op. Even with the pandemic, I think we were challenged in that thinking to reimagine what at-home learning communities can look like, but somehow we still kind of default to co-op. But the work that we're going to do today isn't about 10 or 7 or 5 steps to starting something tangible, but instead to consider that what we are actually creating in creating a homeschool community is something that's intangible. It's like the wind, right? So we can't see the wind, but we can feel it and we experience it. Like obvious example are leaves moving on a tree. So we know that the leaves are not actually moving themselves, but instead the wind is causing the leaves to wind and to move and causing a visual manifestation of what its presence is, a visual manifestation of its presence. And in the same way, what we are actually creating when starting a homeschool community may be manifested as a co-op, micro school, online program, or even an enrichment program. So I just want to take a few minutes to invite us into a quiet space where we can be introspective and meditate on the word community. And what I'll do is give us some guiding questions that can help us with that meditation. And don't feel pressure to write them down or anything. It really is just a moment to sit in stillness and become really self-aware about how we respond or what we think, what we perceive, or even what we feel about community. And we'll just start by taking a deep breath, and I'll give us a few seconds to do that, okay? So when we think about the word community, what comes to mind? When have you felt like you were part of or belonged to this concept of community? How did you know it was community? How do you define it? what problem or problems does community solve? What does it feel like? Is it positive, negative, uncomfortable, safe, unsafe? Does community feel reachable or accessible? And I'm just going to gently bring us out of this still place into the present moment through a breath. Now, I had us do that because I think sometimes we are so familiar with words or even what we're experiencing on a regular basis that we're not always self-aware about what we believe about that thing. So I want to give us a dictionary definition of community. And this is a great time to take some notes, but I'm going to point out something, the words that I think will be beneficial for you to write down, okay? So don't worry about writing down every single word. But according to the dictionary, a community is a unified body of individuals. Unity. And what's interesting about the word unity is that we clearly see it in the word community, right? So community is unity. Another definition is common character. And what I hear in that is the word likeness. And then lastly, social activity. And what I hear in that definition is fellowship. So we have unity, likeness, and fellowship. The other thing that I see when I actually just look at the word community and think about it is the word commune. And so I looked up the definition of commune as well, and it means to be in an intimate conversation or bond with. In other words, fellowship, right? So it circles us back to the word fellowship. So if I could create my own definition of what community is, it would be a group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another. So a group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another. And I'm actually going to repeat this definition several times throughout our talk. Again, because as we're reimagining what we think about community or feel about community and contextualizing it in a different framework, it's helpful to have repetition around this concept, this definition, okay? Y'all with me? Yeah, okay. So right now I want to share with you an ancient Middle Eastern parable or story. And depending on your background, this may even sound familiar to you. So it goes like this. There was a wise man who built his house on a rock. And when the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. But there was a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And when the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, the house fell. And great was its fall. When we build our homeschool communities, we do not want to be like this foolish man who built his house on the sand. What we are creating for our people and our families, our precious Black children, is too important to build on the sand. We must build something that lasts. And that doesn't mean that our organization or our program lasts forever. It means that the thing that we are actually creating isn't the structure, like a co-op microschool, right, program. What we are actually creating is an intangible, immovable foundation just like the wise man's rock. It's not the structure. It's life or an essence that moves through what can be seen, which is the lives of our children and our families. And it exists no matter what the structure is. And it lasts from generation to generation through the hearts and minds of those we've impacted. And that's what we want. We want to build something that lasts. And when the rains fall and the floods come and the winds blow and beat on our structures, they don't fall. And even if they do, because sometimes storms are just that strong, the community cannot be torn apart and we can build again. Okay. So how do we create an intangible group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another? I'm going to talk about and model for you 4 elements or values. Again, doing my duty to add to the countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, no 6, 5, now 4 things that when combined together, create or make up community. And through these elements, this community becomes a strong, immovable rock for us to build on. In other words, a foundation of community. Okay, so again, this is a great place to take notes. 4 elements. The first one is purpose, love, healthy relationships, and boundaries. Thank the Lord for boundaries. Purpose, love, healthy relationships, and boundaries. Okay, so let's get into the first element, purpose. Now, again, I told you we're going to repeat the definition a few times throughout our talk today. So a community is a group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another. So when we think about like-mindedness, we think about people who share the same values or beliefs or interests, and they come together for a specific reason, or in other words, a purpose. And oftentimes that purpose is rooted in those shared values, beliefs, or interests. This purpose is your why. And it also serves as an anchor when those winds and waves get a little rough, and it keeps us unified. So our why or purpose is often articulated and preserved in a mission and vision statement. We want the purpose of our community to be well-defined, having a clear direction and identity. When you're deciding how to teach or where to learn or what activities to do, your mission and vision statement step in as an anchor that keeps you from mission drift, or in other words, from drifting away from your goals. It reminds you of what truly matters and keeps you from being swayed by what others are doing, which we often see on social media, right? Or by passing trends. So summing all of this up, purpose is an element of a solid foundation that's immovable that keeps us grounded in our why. Okay. So the next element we're going to talk about is love. So what is community? A group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another. Love is an anchor that compels us to stick it out when those winds and waves come pounding on the structures that we've built. And it keeps us from being destroyed. Love keeps us from being destroyed. I think that's such a powerful statement. Love, though, can only be an anchor when it's unconditional. And unconditional love is not the same thing as allowing people to violate our boundaries or to continue in bad behavior that brings harm to our community. But instead, unconditional love isn't self-seeking or prideful. It's sacrificial, and it compels us to be a leader who serves with humility. And how many people know that loving folks is not easy? Okay, yeah, I'm getting some amens in there. Also, loving ourselves is not always easy either, right? But I think when I think about my own journey, as a social entrepreneur and a change maker, I've been deeply, deeply hurt and wounded by people. And it's by the same people that I have sacrificed so much in order to serve. I've even been wounded by folks that believed in the mission, but then at some point along the way just abandoned it, or, well, and that felt like they were abandoning me as well, right? Um, so the other thing I think about it is that there's been other times when running my organization felt more like an obligation rather than joy, because I was carrying the weight and the responsibility of being an executive director. As leaders, it's so easy at times to get lost in our own brokenness or get lost in the business side of things and forget that it was love for our kids and for our families and for our community that motivated us to do the work in the first place, or that is motivating us now to do the work in the first place. There will be times of such joy from being together and supporting one another and seeing our kids and families grow and thrive. But there will also be times that we face, that we'll face when relationships are challenging, and or the business side of things just feels like a really heavy load. So when we think about love, I want us to think about love as an element of a solid foundation that's immovable, because it binds us together in unity as it compels us to stick it out in the good and in the bad. Love keeps us from being destroyed. All right, so again, y'all still with me? Yeah, we've talked about purpose, we've talked about love. Now the third element that we're looking at is relationships. And y'all know that relationships and community can be either good or bad. But what we want, of course, is to build a community that is healthy and contributes to the community thriving through those relationships. So really this third element is healthy relationships. So thinking through our definition again of community, a community is a group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another, or in other words, to be in relationship with one another. So back in 2016, I launched a homeschool co-op for Black families, where our kids learned about Black identity and heritage through once a week culturally enriched classes and field trips. And after a while, I started to notice that most, not necessarily all, but most of our parents were single working moms who were deeply committed to homeschooling, but were really, really struggling in life in general. Some of the women were low income. Some had left or were in the process of leaving a violent relationship. Some moms had kiddos who were neurodivergent. Some moms and children also were dealing with serious mental health issues or trauma. And I started to see a great need beyond just academics and student-focused programming. Our families really needed holistic, whole family care and support. We also needed a very intentional relationship-focused community where moms felt comfortable sharing and being vulnerable about what they were going through and asking for help. And then also where we as a community could support those moms, support one another more intimately, which brings us back to the definition of commune, right? So it was being in intimate relationship with one another. I have found that I've been a part of communities where everybody is present, but I don't feel a connection. And I've even been in situations where I'm asked to serve, asked to show up all the time, so that we can get that connection, but then still not find it. So it's on both ends. We want to encourage our families, our moms, our kiddos to be vulnerable, but then we also need to show up and be on the other side and be intimate with one another. Okay, so what I ended up doing is starting a program called Choice. And in the initial design, it targeted 4 areas of holistic whole family support. We provided unrestricted financial support, health and well-being classes, wraparound support, like access to life coaching. We even had a food delivery service, and a socio-cultural support where we created a space to freely talk about issues related to Black homeschooling, or really just what it feels like and what it means to be Black in society in general. Now, in my mind, I strongly believe that if all of our moms participated in every single element of this wonderful program that I put together, that everybody's problems would be solved. But what I found was that people actually chose which aspects of the program they wanted to participate in. And this really, really actually frustrated me because I thought my design was so well thought out, spent a lot of time on it. And I really wanted to test my theory, but I couldn't control when people showed up and when they didn't show up. I wanted to know why. So for the next year, I decided to co-design with our families. And I brought in a research team to do one-on-one interviews, surveys, questionnaires, um, and group focus groups. So I did this at the end of the program to see what was working, what wasn't working, what was resonating, not resonating, what folks wanted to include, and what they also wanted to exclude. And we know that companies really, they do this all the time. They get feedback from their participants or clients all the time. So why did I think or consider our research as co-designing and relationship building? It was because I decided not to only get the feedback, but also be willing to let go of what I thought was needed, to be flexible, to be willing to shift or pivot if needed, to perceive our participants as experts just as much as I considered myself an expert, to truly give them a seat at the decision-making table, not to see this as my program, but to see it as our program. And it turns out that everyone found value in all aspects of the program, but what they really valued the most and wanted more of was the community coaching calls where they got to know one another, ask each other for advice, provide support and encouragement. They wanted to be seen and known. They also really longed for in-person community and connection, but unfortunately at the time, our program was online because of the pandemic. So with all of this in mind, for the following year's program, I humbled myself and made a complete pivot. And so what it now looks like is it's solely focused on one-on-one mentorship, financial support, and connection with the greater community, specifically for Black single working moms. As an organization, we still felt uncomfortable with in-person gatherings due to COVID, but I was really confident that with this new model, because it was co-designed with our moms, was something that could work also beyond the internet in person, but also within the internet world, because we have been able to expand nationwide. And all of our moms report that they feel seen, known, connected, that they feel trusted to make decisions for their families, but they're still really grateful for the mentorship because the mentorship feels like friendship and that they weren't alone. So to sum up this, everything that I just said about relationship, healthy relationships are an element of a solid foundation that's immovable because participants are seen, heard, believed, and they feel like they belong. Okay. All right, so we have one more to go. Boundaries. So last time, everybody should be able to say it with me by now, right? We've said it so many times. A community is a group of unified, like-minded individuals who come together in unity to fellowship with one another. So boundaries are just like a foundation's slab of concrete that has an area. And this area defines where the structure starts, where it ends, the length, the width. In other words, it determines the location. Anything outside of the defined areas is simply out of bounds. It's out of order. Another example of a boundary is a fence around a perimeter of a property. It tells us where the property begins and ends, but it also tells us who the owner is. And the owner is responsible for everything inside of that fence. And anyone who crosses over the boundary is trespassing. But boundaries in a community can be really tricky. A slab of concrete and a fence are tangible, but communal boundaries are intangible, and it can be difficult to perceive. Doctors Henry Cloud and John Townsend wrote a book called Boundaries, and they define a boundary as anything that helps you differentiate you from someone else or shows you where you begin and end. And I think that the same goes for an organization or program, right? What's its function? What is it designed to do? What is it not designed to do? Here are some examples of three boundaries or boundaries in three categories that help to define a homeschool community. So here I go again, adding to our countdown. We have 10, 9, 8, 7, no, 6, 5. I gave you 4, about to give you 3 more. 3 categories of boundaries that help us to define a homeschool community. And again, this is a great place to take notes. I'm going to give you the 3 of them, what these 3 things are, and then I'll do a little bit of quick commentary on each one. So we have an organizational boundary, a participation boundary, and a communication boundary. Organizational, participation, communication. So an organizational boundary defines, for example, so I'm going to give a few examples, defines the structure. So again, is it a program, a school, a co-op, a drop-off? Are we babysitting up in here? Or are we a nonprofit or a for-profit? It defines our the leadership, defines roles, defines responsibilities. Our participation boundaries define expectations for behavior. And that goes for kids as well as parents. Can I get an amen on that one? Okay, yes. But also leaders, we're not exempt from that. Participation boundaries define expectations of programmatic participation, which are often outlined and I believe should be outlined in policies and processes. Organization or participation boundaries define the consequences for violating those policies and processes. Defines schedule, defines the program. And lastly, communication boundaries. Communication boundary defines the process for proper and effective communication. So the purpose for these boundaries is to curb confusion, conflict, unmet expectations, which oftentimes is a huge issue, and harmful behavior. And a word of caution here, we know that sometimes people don't like it when we set boundaries. And honestly, we don't really like it when people set boundaries either. And the reason is because it restricts our movement or what we have access to. And frankly, we want what we want, when we want it, how we want it, how many times we want it, right? And we do, I mean, it's human nature because we're doing it to get our needs met. But to sum up everything that was just said about boundaries, boundaries are necessary for healthy relationships and for building strong, immovable foundations that don't and cannot be divided or fall apart. I want to say one last thing about boundaries really quickly before we do another exercise together. It's really imperative that we have clear, consistent communication of our boundaries, because we can have well-defined boundaries that are well thought out and meticulously put together, but if we don't consistently communicate what those boundaries are and what the consequences are for violating those boundaries, we'll have problems. And I think that this is a really important piece to all of this. If people are not in agreement with our boundaries and decide that the community is not for them, we must stand firm and not compromise to keep them there. Because a lot of times we want the numbers, we want the participation, right? But we don't want to compromise. And we want to respect their decision just like we want them to respect our boundaries. Okay, so y'all with me? Yeah, okay. Uh, I'm just going to sum up very briefly everything that we've talked about because I've said a lot. Um, Community is not a structure, it's purpose, love, healthy relationships. And I just want to throw the word intimate out there also, and boundaries. And when all of these elements are combined, community becomes a strong, solid foundation where our structures can be built. And then when the rains fall and the winds come and the waves come and the winds beat on those structures, a wise community will last and it will stand, and even into the next generation. Okay. So now that we have our foundation of community, what's next? It's really just to build our structures. And today we don't have time to get into however many steps to actually building those structures. But I just want to let y'all know that I do have a couple, like one freebie where I outline everything that we just talked about, but then also it includes some guiding questions that you can use to get started to build your structure, to decide what your structure is if you don't know yet, and to actually get started. Real quick, I'll just put this in the chat. But if you want that freebie, then you can just email me as soon as I can find the chat in this. Okay. Okay, so info@bhsi.education. And in the subject line, just type freebie and I'll send that to you. Okay. Okay, so we have about 8 minutes or so left. And what I'd like to do is bring us back into that still, quiet place for some journaling time, just so that we can think about everything that was said. Um, I'm curious to know, you don't have to share, we'll have some sharing time if you feel comfortable, but I'm curious to know what you thought about community before today's talk and what you're kind of thinking about it now. And I'll just give us three guiding prompts. Again, you can think about what resonates with you, but just spend this time to kind of jot down some notes and just be really reflective. Always start with a deep breath, especially for me because I did all the talking. Okay. So reflect on what you've learned today. What do you think? What do you feel? What do you believe? What elements will your community consist of? And if you remember, I said that I was going to model 4 elements for you. And I used that phrase specifically because these aren't necessarily hard and fast rules or a formula. I do highly recommend that you have a purpose for your community, though. But from today's talk, what elements will your community consist of? And then lastly, what is your vision? In other words, what do you see the outcome as? And how will you get there? That's your mission. Okay, so I'll give us maybe 2 minutes or so. Also, I just want to make a quick statement about why I don't play music. I think it's important for us to get comfortable with the quiet and with the stillness. It helps us to really get in touch and be self-aware without distraction. Gonna give us about 30 more seconds. Okay, and to gently pull us out of the quiet space, we'll just take another deep breath so we can come into the present moment. Okay, so we have some time for maybe one or two of you all to share, if you feel comfortable, your reflections. And we have about a little under 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so. I would love to hear. You can just come off mute, start talking. Okay, so I have a question then, if anyone feels comfortable answering. What did you think about community before today's chat? Was it exactly what we talked about today? Was it something different? And then what about now? Come on, y'all, don't leave me by myself floating out here in the
Okay,
Zoom land.
go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, no, go ahead, Sherry.
I was gonna say, when I came to the space, I felt like I had an idea of what community was. Like, it's people, you come together, you do the thing, yay, you're doing it consistently. I see you. But when you kind of narrowed it down into like-minded, unified, um, fellowshipping. Fellowship to me has such a more intimate definition. Like
Mm-hmm.
fellowship is, that's intentional. It's not happenstance. It's not coincidence. It is an
Right.
intentional bringing together. That kind of made me think about community in a different way. And then once we got to the four, like purpose, love, healthy relationships, and boundaries, um, that just gave more meat to community for me, in that it has to be something that is well thought out when you're creating that space, and that it's not for an immediate void per se, but something long term as more of I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but it has a deeper, there are deeper roots
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm coming away with. Um, and realizing that in some ways, in some spaces, I do have that piece of community um, within a larger gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
That's good. Actually, that's a good point, that we can be a part of this larger community, but then kind of find our niche, our people within that smaller group, within a smaller group. Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing. Um, I want to make sure I say your name right. So come off mute if you will and let me know. Dequetta. Probably butchered that. Oh, I can't hear you.
Look, I forgot this thing wasn't flipped down. I'm sorry. I said it's Dequetta, but I'm used to it. I just tell everyone to call me D.
Okay, D.
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
I wanted to honor the correct pronunciation of your name, but it's my alarm. I just wanted to acknowledge your statement, your comment. You said that you shared the same sentiments about community It just enlightened it. So that's really good to hear, right? So there's not that you need me to validate you, right? But there's some agreement there. And then
Yes.
Des said, yeah, and then Des said it put a name to what I always felt about community. I love that. Community was always a feeling, but I put it into words. Alicia, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, well, I think Sherry mentioned kind of what I was going at. I think a lot about this and how to create, spaces where people feel deeper connections. And, a lot of the things you said really were exactly along the same lines. I was thinking of, like, I had broken it down to, um, community, like you have, like you said, a common purpose, right? So we're all homeschooling. You have, you come together for a practical purpose, like we come together to talk about strategies and things we're doing, things that's working, things that's not working. That's sort of our common purpose as well. But there's also, like you said, sort of this fun piece where we need to get together and do things, that's just good for your spirit as people. And then a fourth, like all the people that I'm really close with, because we have been basically vulnerable with each other in some way, right? Like there's a even deeper level of connection. Like we can go on and hang out, but but unless I've actually shared something about myself or they've shared something with me, that's really, what kind of gets us in community, because that's a deeper level of, apathy or empathy. And then just putting yourself out there. Right. So I totally agree with all those things. I think what you are talking about that I find so interesting is, like almost from a research perspective, like how do you actually go about documenting all of this and creating it? It's one thing to just go out and say, all right, we're going to schedule this, which is what I do. We're going to schedule, bowling night for the mamas. And we're going to get together at co-op while the kids are taking this class. And we're going to get together and talk about math. And then sometimes during Harambe, somebody might share something that's going on in their life and we're sitting in a circle, and that's sort of that deeper level that we know what stays in that circle doesn't leave. But we haven't actually like written this stuff out. You know what I mean? Like, how do you, like what we're doing is just sort of organically happening. But I think that as people build more and more communities, um, it would be really helpful to like intentionally think about doing those things, or realizing we haven't hung out in a while. Let's, like, I don't even know, like what does your research say the frequency should be for some of these things?
Are you asking me?
Oh yeah, that's a question.
Okay. What did my research ask me again? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just, as I think about sort of those four things, like what does your research say is the best frequency? Because sometimes you have people that you haven't seen in a year and you can get back together and just like that. And then sometimes you have people you get together, you haven't seen in a year, and it's kind of awkward, like, like, okay, even though we've been vulnerable and I know you, you just don't quite feel in community with them anymore. And so I wonder if that's just like, I don't know, maybe yeah, I don't know. I guess my question is, what is the frequency for doing those things that you mentioned that builds the strongest community? I don't even know if that's a fair question.
No, that makes sense. And so I think I would maybe reframe the question from something that can be quantified to something that's just intentional. So, like we talked about having a really well-defined purpose and having it written down, and that really being a part of your foundation that you refer to again and again. And so you're not doing things that are outside of what that initial purpose is, and everybody is clear about what that purpose is. And then when it comes to relationships, it's about being intentional. I can't tell you how many times I've been a part of communities, and when I'm there, everybody knows me and loves me and I love them back. But if there's a period of time that I've left, then there's no one that's like, where did Joyelle go? Right? Like, what happened to her? Are her kids okay? Okay. So that is, I think that we're talking about creating a culture and a standard for how we show up. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Doesn't really
Okay.
answer yeah, I need to move my brain from frequency.
From this idea, because we like formulas, just like when I started, we like steps, right?
Yeah.
But what we're dealing with is something that is that intangible, like spirit of what we're building. So that actually brings me to the very last thing. I know we're over a little bit. Thanks for sticking it out with me.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure, if everyone's cool.
Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. Okay,
Okay.
so when you're building this with families and you're saying, hey, we want to come together and create a set of, what's the word that you use?
Like elements to our community that
Elements to our community. What is everyone participating? Is that like a committee that you take back to people? Is it a series of conversations? Are there, like, what does that look like? The building collaboratively with others.
Yeah, I think what you described, the examples that you gave are all valid. It could be all of the above. I think it's just really rooted in co-designing. So, for example, what I did was I brought a research team, and you don't have to hire a research team to come in necessarily, but we did focus groups. And I actually removed myself from the focus group so that folks could talk freely and give feedback without feeling like they were hurting my feelings. But we did surveys, we did one-on-one interviews where we talked just like this. And I asked questions like, what did you think about the program? Is there something you would want to change? What was valuable to you? And then also, I think I'm trying to think how to say this. I think it's switching how we think about inviting folks into spaces and challenging ourselves on the top-down thinking. And then from that, we get ideas on how to commune with one another. Remember, I talked about like, you're an expert, I'm an expert. Does that make sense? So just switching how we're thinking, I think then leads to behavior that can assist in that co-design. I don't necessarily want to give you a formula, and I know that might be a little frustrating, but again, we're kind of talking about more of like an intangible heart change, perspective change that then our behaviors follow. If I'm co-designing with you, I'm not always just going to be in my office, scheduling stuff, designing things, and then saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think your piece that you said just now about thinking about how you invite people into the group is key, because a lot of times you want to get invited to a group and you feel like there's a hierarchy. Number one, you're being invited by somebody that you assume is sort of higher than you. And so then it kind of feels like a disconnect sometimes between the person who brings you in and then everyone else.
Right.
Right? Like
And
the boss.
let me add to that. I have then found as a leader, when I was designing a program like that, no one felt like I needed that same support, because I'm the executive director, I'm the program director, I'm the founder, and so there was this sense of removal that I'm building this beautiful community, but I don't always feel like I'm actually taking part of what I built. So that's another aspect of it.
Yeah, we need another whole conversation on that piece. Where are my leaders at?
Yeah, we do. I love the fact that we've been able to chat this and ask questions and share. That means a lot to me, because again, on Zoom, it's just like the space between us. But just to close out and really to address some of your questions, I just want to put out there that because I said so much today, we have so much to think about. If you want support or you need support, I'm here. So you can always contact me for one-on-one mentorship or coaching. And I even have a 4-session program where we go through together these 4 elements, and or help you decide and determine what you feel like the elements should be. Because again, I'm not giving you a formula. You have agency, you have autonomy to build this community as you see fit. And then there's even an 8-session program where we do both the how to build a homeschool community, but then also how do we translate that into building a structure. And if you all know any families that need some one-on-one mentorship or single moms that need support, we can do that coaching as well. And then I have a Homeschooling 101 program for folks that are getting started or want to get started and they're freaking out on how to get, what do I do? And what you can do to contact me, let me just put this in here real quick, is you can just send me a message on this website and just tell me what you need support with. And we can chat about it. And yep. And if you want to join BHSI's email list, then you can just go to info@BHSI. I think I put that in the chat already. I can put it in again and join the email list, and I can tell you what's going on. And when we open up our programming again, because it's still online, like I said, and we can enroll folks from all over the place. So, all right, I know we went over a little bit, but this was awesome. I just appreciate you all, and I'm so grateful that we were able to do this. Yeah. Okay, I'm like, don't just stare at me, y'all. Talk back.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
This was.
All right, bye, guys.